Hey y'all, Katie here with MOMnation, and welcome to another episode of Our Love Story. We know being in a relationship is hard, so Dyanna Eisel, certified couples counselor, and I talk through different tips and tricks to help you navigate your relationship and get through everyday life. While you're here on your favorite podcast platform, please subscribe to our channel. Or if you'd like to visit us on YouTube and watch the video, our handle is MOMnationUSA. We hope you enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Our Love Story Q&A with a couples counselor. And here is our very favorite couples counselor, Dyanna Eisel. Welcome back, Dyanna.
Thank you. Good morning.
You're actually not a guest. You're just the co-host. I don't know why I introduced you like guests every time. And it's been over 2 years now, I think, that we've been doing this, right?
Yes. Yep. 2 years.
So my co-host, Dyanna, not the guest.
I can be both. It's cool.
She's easy. I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm good. It's Friday.
It's Friday. It's so nice to see you. And
Likewise.
For those of you who have been following us, you know what we do here. We talk through marriage things with, again, our very favorite couples counselor, Dyanna, now co-host of Our Love Story. And sometimes we will pull an anonymous post out of the MOMnation Arizona group and talk through that. And today, that's what we're going to do. And this one, I'm looking very forward to diving into because I feel like a lot of people deal with this and struggle with this. So I'm going to share my screen, show you guys the post. I'm going to read it for those of you who are listening on the podcast. And it says, this one came at the end of last month, so it's pretty fresh. Looking for advice, processing out loud. My husband and I have been married for 12 years and have a decent marriage, but I feel we are no longer in love. It's gotten to a point where I feel guilty for holding him back from finding a partner who adores him, and I stay with him now for convenience because we have 2 elementary-age children. I feel like I annoy him, and I know he annoys me. We don't really speak about our issues and instead have just lost our intimacy. Will it get better as the kids age? Should I just allow him to move on? I don't feel like I need the intimacy like he does and could honestly be alone with my friends and family. He is a good father and a good man, and I want to do right by him. The thought of separating is really daunting, but I'm honestly feeling like it would be a better option for him to find love and not just practicality. Ladies, what are your thoughts? So, lady, what's your thought?
I got a lot of thoughts. I was over here writing some notes down too as you're reading it. There's a couple words that jumped out at me, which was like, we have a decent marriage, right? And then the poster went in to explain like, we get along, like practically we get along, but like the intimacy isn't there, but we don't talk about our issues, right? And that's like avoidance, right? Like that's just pure 100% avoidance. So oftentimes we get into these seasons or positions in our relationship when we're trying to avoid conflict for the risk of having conflict, right? Like we've talked about this before, like conflict is like this big scary thing. Like, let's not do it. Let's do anything other than having conflict, right? Which ends up just creating more problems later because it builds up resentment and contempt and all of those things that eat away at the intimacy of the relationship, right? So intimacy isn't just the physical intimacy, which she sort of alluded to at the end of the post, but it isn't just the physical intimacy that's important. It's the emotional intimacy. It's the feeling validated. It's feeling heard. It's feeling like, your boundaries are being respected, that someone is emotionally present with you, someone that can take accountability for their behavior. All of those things build trust, which builds emotional intimacy. You can't have intimacy without the trust, either physical or emotional. You know what I mean? So I'd be really curious, like, where is the accountability on both sides? Because I hear what she's saying, but like we don't talk about our issues. It's definitely a we thing, right? So like, how did we get there? Like, at what point did we stop doing the things in the relationship and we started avoiding things? Like, when did that happen? Was it when you had kids? Was it when you got married? Was it some other life adjustment that happened that sort of just pushed everything to the back burner, right? And then it just festered there. And then it got really easy to just continue that cycle. Why are we going to bring this stuff up now? Oh, that was 6 months ago. Why am I going to bring that up now? We're just going to keep on keeping on, right? And everything just sort of creates this huge dog pile effect, and there's this big mound of resentment that's built up. So, ultimately, I feel like there's room for accountability on both parts to acknowledge, like, this was my part in it, this was my part in it. You know what I mean? I'm willing to bet he feels very similarly, right?
Yeah.
Like, and he's just not saying anything. We all know that traditionally, culturally, socially, in our culture, it's not really rewarding for men to talk about their feelings. So he might just be under this premise of, like, I'm doing what I have to do. I'm working, I'm providing money, I'm, helping provide for the family, that kind of thing. But, his emotional needs might not be getting met either. That's not to minimize or invalidate this poster and what she's saying, but he's probably thinking very similarly to what she is, right? So how can we come together and just lay it all out there? Like, listen, like, I don't feel happy. I don't really feel like you're particularly happy. What do we want to do here? If we're going to improve this relationship, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really hard. It's going to be really vulnerable and really gross feeling for a little while, right? But that's how you're growing, when you come out of your comfort zone, you know what I mean? Or not. Like, but we need to decide this together, ultimately, because we want the best outcome for us and for our kids. And if we can come together and talk about that, we're much more likely to have that, amicable outcome, regardless of which direction they choose. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. So much in there, and I appreciate all of that. A couple of things that I wanted to mention. I'm making notes here on my, because mom brain might forget things. But I feel like a lot of us deal with, we have this, our relationships a certain way, and then we have kids, and it's just everything changes. And that's a really overwhelming time, especially if it's your first time child and you've never been through it before. So you're kind of trailblazing. If you're also working a full-time job, we all know the household is also a full-time job. So there's lots of things happening in there. And I feel like it's really easy since those things are such high priority. I'm not saying a relationship isn't, but I feel like it's so easy for the relationship to just kind of take the back burner a lot of times. And I often see, just in, being in the position that I'm in with MOMnation, I see this with a lot of moms and a lot of couples, that their relationship changes a lot once
Yeah,
kids come into the picture.
absolutely. It's inevitable. It's going to change, right? For the better or for worse, it's going to change. Your identity is going to change. You're taking on a whole other role instead of just husband or wife. Like, now you're mom or dad, you know what I mean? So you have this whole other identity that now you have to figure out how to navigate around your partner and identifying what their expectations are. And generally, we tend to blow past that expectation part, and we just start winging it, and we just start doing things. And then suddenly it's not working, but I'm not going to say that it's not working. And so we're just going to get really resentful and really unhappy because our expectations aren't being met, right? So very rarely do we take a few steps back. Okay, so what are our expectations going forward when we do have the baby? What does the household responsibilities look like? Who's going to stay home if the baby's sick? How are we going to navigate that? Who's going to take them to daycare if they're going to go to daycare? Like, all of those things, I feel like in a lot of cases are very surface level conversations, but aren't really getting down to, okay, what happens if I'm not feeling satisfied about our arrangement? Like, can we come back and talk about it? You know what I mean? We don't really get into the what ifs. And sometimes the what ifs are going to, like, create anxiety. We don't want to do that, right? Because
Right.
plans are going to change. It's like a birth plan, right? You can have that thing like 3 pages long. It's probably not going to happen that way, right? Like, things are always
Rarely.
going right. Like, it's just, things change, things happen, and that's fine. Then we figure out a way to pivot. But if we can agree that we've got to be flexible, we've got to be malleable, but this is what I expect going forward, as, like, this is what I want to see in a father, this is what I want to see in a mother, this is what I feel like our relationship should look like, or what I want it to look like. And yeah, we might hit a season where we're not spending a whole lot of time together, but, like, I'm committed to continuing to check in with you, and I expect that you will come to me if you're not feeling seen, if you're not feeling heard, if you're feeling disconnected from me. Like, we got to put that out there on Front Street right now, that we can agree to do that before things get really, really far down the road and these feelings are just, like, really hard to come back from. You know what I mean?
And yet another reason why it's important to have a counselor kind of guide you along the way, even if you aren't having issues, because I will tell you that what you just rattled off, it's like you need to have some sort of checklist for new parents or for married couples that are starting to talk about having kids, because I never thought to have those conversations. I consider myself a fairly smart human being. I never thought to set those expectations. I was just like, woo wee, let's have a baby. You know what I mean? And that was it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get it. I mean, I think a lot of people, to be fair, think that way, right? But we're evolving as people, as parents, as individuals, right? And so a lot of our parents were just following generational expectations, right? But
Mm-hmm.
like it's 2024 and we are bucking a lot of those traditional like gender norms and what husband, wife, provider, all that stuff looks like. You know what I mean? So like now is that time to do that, to make that change, to make the change for our relationships, for our kids' future relationships, right? To be more emotionally aware and to use couples counseling not for crisis management, right?
Right.
Don't use it as a last ditch effort. Like, let's have someone objective help us navigate what we want our roles to look like when we do become new parents, when we do move in together, like those sorts of things, to get ahead of it instead of being reactive to it after the fact. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot, even still, even in 2024, I think a lot of people view what you do as damage, like not necessarily damage control, but as damage cleanup.
Absolutely. I mean, research and statistics show that most people wait 7 years after they start having conflict to seek out couples counseling. 7 years is a long time to have to wade through all of the stories that have been created, the narratives about the relationship that have been created, all that resentment that's built up, unmet needs, unmet expectations, crossed boundaries. Like 7 years worth, even
Mm-hmm.
5 years worth, 2 years worth is a
Yeah.
lot,
Yeah.
right? So if we can just have those expectations up front and setting those boundaries and making sure they're clear up front would save so much later. You know, you're making that investment now instead of having to do it later as damage control.
Mm-hmm. Another thing that I wanted to pull out of your initial response to this post was having that sit down conversation. Do you have any tools that you can suggest that somebody would use to keep out of the weeds and keep on point? Like, let's not talk through the details of who did what to who in this particular incident because you can really get lost in that. But how do
Mhm.
you stick to the point and the big picture?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. One is staying on topic. Stay on one topic. When we get into conflict sometimes and we get reactive, we start pulling these arrows out of our quiver from like the
Yeah.
last 6 months, 6 years. And it's like, what were we even talking about in the first place? We got nothing resolved, but now we both feel even worse than we did at the beginning of this conversation, right? So stay on topic. Agree at the beginning that if one person's talking, the other person is not talking, right? Like when that person is done talking, then the other person gets a turn to talk. Like don't interrupt when you guys are talking. It's super disrespectful and also
Mm-hmm.
just derails the whole point that's trying to be made, right? Asking the clarifying questions after that. So once the first person is done talking, okay, I have some questions. Like this is what I heard. Is this what you meant? I need to clarify what you meant by this. You know what I mean? And allowing the space for like clarity before we make some assumptions about what we think we heard and running with it, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
get that clarity first before you go into it with the idea that my partner is trying to hurt me, right? Like I think
Mm-hmm.
most of the time we like to think that our partner is not out to get us, they're not coming for us, but sometimes we hear things that feel particularly spicy and we don't ask the question. We don't ask, is
Mm-hmm.
that really what you meant? Because this is what I heard, right? And then the final thing too is going beneath the content, right? Like there's the content and then there's the process. We get so stuck in the content sometimes that
Right.
it's not even what we're talking about. We're talking about the process that happens underneath. I'll give you an example that I give my clients sometimes. If there's a cup in the sink, right? And the wife comes in and is like, oh my God, you left the cup in the sink again. This is so annoying. And he comes in and he's like, what's the big deal? It's just a cup. Well, it's not just a cup. It's really annoying. I've asked you not to do that, and you continue to do it. So we think we're talking about a cup, right? We're not talking about the cup. We're talking about how the wife feels like, I don't feel like you appreciate how much time I spend cleaning the kitchen. I don't think you appreciate how much time I spend keeping this house clean. I don't think you appreciate all the time that I spend just taking care of our home and making sure everything is nice and clean for you when you come home. Did she say any of that? Nope. She
No.
went after the cup. So now we think we're talking about the cup. You know what I mean? It's really hard to determine sometimes what is the content if we stick to that. But take off the content. What are we actually talking about right now? We could talk for hours about this cup, but what
Right.
are we actually talking about? You know what I mean? And then that's the focus of the conversation. I don't feel appreciated. I don't feel like you're grateful for all the time I spend cleaning the kitchen, cleaning the house. Oh, now I understand what that cup actually means to you. You don't feel like I'm grateful for the efforts that you put in. You don't feel like I appreciate all the effort you put in. That really sucks. And I certainly do not want you to feel that way. But now I understand what that means. Now, the next time that comes up, it's not just the cup in the sink. It's, I know that this means I really appreciate how much she does when I just go and put it in the dishwasher. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so let's dive into that just a little bit more, because I feel like in that example, maybe the wife, with the cup wasn't necessarily realizing what her trigger actually was coming from and what was fueling that trigger. So do you have any advice on just how somebody can snap? It's almost like you need like a rubber band on your wrist. Okay, triggered. Now take a
Slow it
breath
down.
and figure out where this trigger's coming from.
Yeah, absolutely. Slow it down. Slow your brain down just a little bit if you can, right? So here's the process. There's the trigger, and then there's the thought. This is what I think about when I get triggered. And then there's the emotion that comes with it, and then there's the behavior. Quite often, we just bulldoze right through the thought step. We go from trigger to emotion to behavior, right? And just like that. You know what I mean? And we don't think about, okay, so why does this really bother me that much? Because it is a cup, but I think it feels like it's more than that. What is it really that bothers me so much? And really thinking it through and thinking about, like, why does this bother me so much before I get to the emotion, before I get to the behavior. This is a learned practice. It is not easy to do, and you're not going to do it flawlessly all the time. It's fine. But really putting the effort into, you recognize that you are triggered by something. Why are you triggered by the thing? And are you actually safe or in danger? When we're triggered, that's kind of our body's signal that, like, we're in danger. You know what I mean? If you use the example of, if you are in a very traumatic car accident, right? And so every time you see a fire truck go by with lights and sirens on, you get triggered, right? Because your body kind of like senses that danger, right? That trigger is always going to be there. Fire trucks are always going to be a thing, right? But if I see that fire truck and I think about, oh, I know why my body's feeling like this. I know why my heart is beating faster, because it reminds me of that car accident. But I also know right now that I'm safe and everything's okay. And then the emotion and behavior after that are in kind with that thought process. You know what I mean? So triggers, like, a lot of triggers just don't go away, but we learn how to navigate them and understand them better so that we don't become so reactive to them each and every time, you know?
I love what you said right there, and I want to dive into that just a little bit more too, because I feel like what you are telling us is get present in the present moment.
Absolutely.
Because we can quickly revert to wherever that trigger is coming from, right? And that could be a different time and space. It most likely is a different time and space. It could be a childhood thing. So
Absolutely.
slowing down, remembering, hey, I'm safe, check the date, maybe have something like, I'm constantly fidgeting with things, right? Like maybe have something to fidget with. Like, how do you feel about that and grounding?
Yeah, absolutely. Finding some way to ground yourself, using your senses, right? Using your five senses to ground yourself. Having a piece of hard candy, having a fidget, something like that to give you a little bit more time to ground yourself from that anxiety. Go take a break. Go step outside. If you have kids in the house, like, go to the bathroom. Like, go somewhere where you can just be for a second to like collect your thoughts. You know what I mean? So absolutely. You said some of those triggers come from like childhood. Yes. If we're using that same cup example, right? And the husband came back and said, I can never do anything right. You're always picking on me and I just can't do anything right. Nothing I ever do is good enough. Whoa, hold on a second. What are we actually talking about right now? We're not talking about the fact that you've left this cup in the sink 45 times, but I sense that this is a message. This is somebody else's voice that you're hearing, that you're not good enough. You're always screwing up. You never do anything right. Right. And so sometimes those voices that come from our parents become our internal dialogue. And when we sense any sort of, again, danger, right, or some sort of threat, we're immediately triggered and we blow past that thought. If you took a moment to think about, okay, what is it actually that she's saying? Is she talking about a cup right now, or is she telling me that I suck? You know what I mean? And I don't do anything right. I don't think that's what she said, but I understand this is very triggering for me. And maybe this is a conversation I can have with her. You know what I mean? Like, I understand that it's really annoying that I leave my cup in the sink, and I do it a lot. Sometimes when I feel like you're coming at me, it makes me feel X, Y, and Z. You know what I mean? And now this is a conversation that they've had together, and it's sort of a like repair that's been made, because now I understand what that means to you, and I will be more mindful when I come to you with like, hey, it's really upsetting to me. I feel X, Y, and Z, you know, when you're starting up that sort of conversation. That is not the same thing as walking on eggshells. That is not the same thing as walking on eggshells. It is called a soft startup, and understanding where your partner is coming from and being really calm and considerate with whatever your needs are. You have to stay in your lane. They have to stay in theirs. The mission is not to control their emotional response. Your mission is to control yours. You know what I mean?
That's huge. And I feel like that gets lost quite a bit because, you know, I know that some people have the experience where their spouse's anxiety or their spouse's unhappiness, they really sort of take on. And I see that you understand what I'm saying. Can you kind of dive into that just a little bit, and maybe why that is and how to recognize when you're doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much like an anxious behavior when we try to take on the emotions of other people. A lot of times, people who do that identify themselves as an empath, and they're like, "I can't help it. Like I'm an empath." Well, most commonly, people who identify themselves as empaths, and this isn't everybody, but a lot of times, being an empath, quote unquote, is it's a trauma response. So people who identify, not everyone, but a lot of people who identify as empaths, if they walk into a room full of people at a party, they're more likely to hone in on the person that's like over in the corner, looks kind of grumpy, is kind of not engaged with people. Why are they gravitating towards them? It's not because they have empathy for them. It's because they're keeping an eye on them to keep themselves safe. I need to keep an eye on that person over there because they look like they could be a danger to me. And maybe not like a literal physical danger, but an emotional danger, right? And so when we take on those emotions, it typically comes from childhood. A parent or both parents that are like, you made me so mad, or you made me cry, or I wouldn't have yelled at you if you didn't do this. And putting that ownership and projecting that onto their kids, who then become adults and they feel like they have to take ownership of everybody else's feelings too, because that was their role as a child, right? But really, you're only responsible for your own. Like, you just have to stay in your lane and let the other person stay in their emotional lane. That's not your job. And I hear this all the time. Well, if I say something, then they're going to get really mad. Okay. If they can't control their emotional response, that's their problem. If they refuse to be accountable and make changes, then you can make a decision as to what you want to do is in terms of the future of the relationship, right? But you cannot manipulate or dictate how another person responds. That's not fair to you, and that's not fair to them. You know what I mean?
I have discovered some other tools that could be very helpful, I feel, during this kind of really deep, revealing, very overwhelming, very vulnerable conversation, and ways to kind of check in on yourself. And this maybe sounds silly. I don't know if this is something you do or use or how you feel about this, but just a simple picture of a thermometer. And, you
Absolutely.
know, there's 0 to 100, let's just say. I mean, here in Phoenix, it's 150, but we'll make it easy. You know, and at what point in that temperature, like in that thermometer, do you come out of your window, right? So at what point, is it at 50? Is it at 25 where you just kind of go straight to 100? You know what I mean? And maybe temperature gauge yourself. And if you have to, like you said, step away from the conversation for 10 minutes or something,
Yep.
like that should be okay with your spouse. They should get that. That should be all right.
Yeah.
But that way you can kind of stay in tune, which I think is easier to emotionally regulate than being out of tune, obviously.
Absolutely. Like, not only does that build trust, but it builds intimacy in the relationship to be able to do that. But that requires you to stay emotionally present with yourself, right? That requires you to be practicing those skills while you're inside of your window of tolerance rather than trying to implement those skills when you're already outside your window of tolerance, right? So it's like, okay, I already know this is not going in a great direction. Like, I can already tell I'm getting upset. So I'm going to go take a shower and then I'm going to come back and we're going to finish this conversation because, like, I want to feel more level headed. Right. And so the ultimate trust test is for your partner to be like, cool, I get it. All right. Like, I'd really love to have this conversation right now, but I know that you have enough respect for me right now that you want to be level headed and you want to have this conversation in a calm way. So go do what you need to do. You got to come back, right? Like, we've talked about this before. You got to come back. If you say you're going to leave, you have to come back, right? Otherwise, your partner's not going to trust you in the future. If you say, I'm going to go walk the dog, I'll be back. Wait, no. We're going to finish this conversation right now. Because in the past, you don't come back, right? So having that mutual respect, that mutual trust that you're going to trust that I'm going to come back. I'm also going to trust you that you're not going to pursue me when I tell you that I need a break. Right.
Yeah,
and that is like
that's
one of the easiest ways to build trust. Easy in that moment, doesn't feel that way because the person that's waiting has to self-soothe. You really just got to like distract yourself, do something, whatever, until that person comes back. Right. And then the tough part is for the person who stepped away to come back and be like, okay, I'm ready now. Like, let's do this again. You know what I mean? But that is a really effective way to build trust in the relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And I also love what you said about slowing down. And, you know, you can have kind of some little tools for that too. So for instance, if you ask me a question right now, Dyanna, and I need to think about it, got my water.
Absolutely.
Okay, now I can answer you. Right? So
Absolutely.
maybe identifying what those little things are that you can do to just kind of reset yourself and be able to think and deliver a valuable response.
Definitely, because that's what you want to get out of this, right? If your mission going into the conversation is I want to win, then this probably isn't the mindset for you to be going into this conversation with. But if you're going into it with this is an opportunity for us to both be heard and to resolve something, like, that makes it much easier to employ those skills, right?
I love that you said that because it's not about win-lose.
Right.
It's win-win. I mean, I know that maybe sounds so simple and silly, but it truly is. Like, I feel like in order for both partners to truly succeed, they both have to feel like they're winning, not winning because somebody else is losing, though.
Right. That we are winning together.
Right. Good stuff, friend. Anything else you want to add to that one?
No, that was a good one. I hope that the original poster, I hope she listens in and I hope it gives her some stuff to reflect on.
I totally agree. Hopefully it was helpful. You know, side note, I know I've told you this in the past, but every once in a while when we choose an anonymous post like this, we don't know who it is either. You know, I mean, we're just as clueless as the rest of the members of the group as to who it is. But every once in a while, I'll have one raise their hand, reveal themselves to me, send me a DM or whatever, and say, you know, I was the one that you chose, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We had a success story that I shared with you a couple of months ago, and I think it was 9 months ago or 10 months ago that we had done the show and didn't know who it was, whatever, went about our lives. And she DM'd me not too long ago and said, you guys saved our marriage. And now they saved their marriage, but it's awesome that she was right place, right time, and listened to that. And I love the fact that what was delivered, mostly by you, of course, is valuable and helpful. So
I
thank
love
you.
that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Changing lives, friend. You are changing lives.
I love
All
that.
right, everyone, hop on over to, if you'd like to check out any of our previous episodes, you heard at the beginning of the show, we've been doing this for over 2 years. And it seems like it hasn't been that long, but then again, it seems like we've been doing it forever. So I don't know, it's weird. But pop over to our YouTube channel. It is at MOMnation USA. That is our handle. Scroll down just a little bit. You will see the Our Love Story playlist there. Or if you prefer the podcast style, you'd rather listen to it, then hop over to your favorite podcast platform, do a quick search for MOMnation Talk Radio. And there we are. We will be back again next month. Thank you so much, my dear.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.